Kia ora, and welcome to the Marlborough Book Festival podcast, the place where you can hear writers talk about their work, their lives, and the inspiration behind their writing. I'm Claudia Small, the treasurer on the committee, and today I'm thrilled to be introducing the wonderful Kirsten McDougall in conversation with Rachael King. Climate change is no laughing matter, but Kirsten McDougall's fast-paced novel She's a Killer, set in a foreseeable future Aotearoa, is full of unexpected humour. Her apathetic protagonist, Alice, is content to observe society's disarray until a teenage genius with a fantastic backstory upends her life and emboldens her to act. Kirsten discusses her masterful plot, fresh characters, and the power of fiction to help us face up to climate forecasts. The 2023 Marlborough Book Festival is being held from July 21 to 23, and author details will be available soon. For now, please enjoy Kirsten McDougall speaking with Rachael King at the 2022 Marlborough Book Festival.
Kia ora everyone, welcome to Spy Valley Wines. It is so cool to have events back here and filling our cellar door, so we're so grateful for you to come all the way out here, and awesome to have the team here today. So Spy Valley Wines, we're really proud sponsors of the Marlborough Book Festival, so such a cool event, really exciting to have this over the weekend. Our chair of the session is award-winning novelist and short story writer Rachael King, who was, until recently, the program director of Word, the Christchurch Writers Festival. We are delighted to have her here in Marlborough to talk with Kirsten McDougall. Thank you so much, Rachael. Thanks, ladies.
No mai haere mai ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa. As you heard, my name is Rachael King, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you here to this Marlborough Book Festival session. Kirsten McDougall, She's a Killer. I want to say a huge thanks to Sophie and Sonia and Hannah and the rest of the committee and the team at the festival. This is possibly one of my favourite book festivals in the world. You guys are so lucky, I can't tell you. And as a fellow festival director, I was always quite jealous of the wonderful hospitality that they get to offer to their writers, but and also to their audience. So They run a really tight ship, and we're very lucky to be here. I think I finally nagged them into letting me come and share some things. So, yeah, I'm really happy about that. So I'm here to tell you now that Kirsten McDougall is not a killer.
That you know.
That we know. But she is a killer writer. Cue groans and terrible puns. So She's a Killer is, of course, the title of her latest novel, which stormed up the bestseller list when it came out last year. It captured something of the zeitgeist of these weird times in which we live. It's set in the near future of imminent climate disaster, where food is expensive and water scarce, where class structures are amplified, and where wealthy people from overseas, or wealthugees, are buying their way into New Zealand, one of the last societies still functioning. Our narrator is Alice, a near-genius slacker who inadvertently finds herself pulled into climate action. Now, that all sounds a bit doom and gloom, but you can be assured that this is also bloody funny. This is Kirsten's third book. Her first book was The Invisible Rider. It was a novel in linked stories and introduced Kirsten as a wry and clever storyteller with an acute sense of place, character and irony. Yeah. It was also bloody funny. Her second novel was different in mood and tone, which we'll come back to. It wasn't bloody funny, but it is an atmospheric, semi-supernatural, semi-thriller that was shortlisted for the Ngaio Marsh Award for Best Novel and longlisted for the Ockhams as well, I believe, yes. But wait, she's not just a novelist. Kirsten's also a bang-up short story writer. In 2020, she won the Sunday Star Times Short Story Award for her dystopian, Shirley Jackson-esque story, Walking Day. And recently, The Newsroom published a brilliant story, Young Boys Take a Short Walk Through the Kingdom of Heaven. So today we're going to have a chat about her work and some of its themes, a bit about the craft of writing. So I hope are there any writers or aspiring writers in the audience today? Oh, well, never mind. You're just too shy to say, I'm sure. And then we'll have some time for questions at the end. But first, please join me in welcoming Kirsten.
Kia ora.
Can we start with short stories, actually? Because you told me the other day that you just found that newsroom story in a drawer that you'd written a while ago, and you just kind of rediscovered it. Is that true?
Yeah. Kia ora tātou. It's really lovely to be here, and I'm actually just totally excited to be speaking with you, Rachel.
Oh, thanks.
I did. I wrote this story, I didn't actually look at the date on the file, but it might have been like 2019. And I'd filed it away. I think I had my head in novel. Yeah, well, I was heading towards novels at the time, but I'd had this a school excursion with some children. It might have even been earlier than that, and it was utterly hilarious. And I thought, I've got to capture this before I forget anything, because I've actually got a terrible memory. I think that writers with good memories. You have a good memory.
No, I have a terrible memory.
Oh, okay. Well, there are some writers who have really, really good memories. Elizabeth Knox is one. And I feel often quite envious because they can sort of pick bits of their lives and pull them into their work. And I've got to write things down if I'm going to remember anything, particularly language, because I'm really interested in the way people speak. And this short story that you refer to has children speaking, and children say the most batshit crazy, hilarious stuff. Yeah, so I had to get that down very quickly, but I just put it away. And as a writer, you like to be active and keep putting your work out there. And I was looking back through files because I was filing some new short stories, and I went, oh, that story. And I opened it up and I thought, oh, that's actually quite cool. And so I sent it off to Steve Braunius, who's here, and has done an amazing job at supporting the publication of short fiction, because for a number of years I worked for Victoria University Press, now Te Herenga Waka University Press. I was there for almost 9 years as the publicity manager. And one of the things that we'd noticed, actually, since I'd started working there in 2013, was that we were getting very few submissions of short fiction collections. And to the point where in about 2018, I was like, where are the short fiction writers? Like, we're just not seeing them. And then strangely, probably in the last 2 years, like too many. we can't publish them all now. But I felt as if a lot of the short fiction writers had moved to essays. So you get these beautiful writers. So Orr mentioned Ashley Young earlier. Kate Camp has just put out her fantastic collection of it's sort of memoir in chapters, but they read like short stories as well. She uses a lot of those techniques, dialogue, humour, really creating the scene for you. So I felt like a lot of the short fiction writers have maybe moved to essays, but they're swinging back around. But I really would sort of say thanks, Steve, for bringing that back and giving short story writers a platform, because there aren't that many. I mean, there are a few publications, but actually I've always wanted an audience, and it's not in journals. The journals speak to writers. We buy the journals and read them, but actually to get a story on Newsroom, you're going to get far more you're going to reach a wider readership. Even though it can be a pain. I don't know, does anyone read on their phone? Do you? I mean, like stories, do you read fiction on your phone? Yeah.
On my laptop.
Yeah, well, I'm reading Helen Garner on my phone at the moment because I get it through Libby, the library, and loving it. But, so that's that.
I remember when I was writing short stories years ago, and, it was like, do you get it published in Sport or Landfall, or was it only published online? Like online was seen as something that was lesser than the other places.
And that's changed completely.
Yeah, now I think you're like, well, I could send it to Landfall, which would be a great honour to have my work published in Landfall, or I could send it to Steve and he might publish it on Newsroom, and actually people would read it. Yeah. Because you can share things more easily with your friends, and it's a really great way to build up word of mouth. And
yeah.
Your win with the Sunday Star Times competition was very, the timing was great too, because of course your book came out a year later or something, wasn't it? So
yeah, when was that? So that was early 21, and the book came out in October of that. Yeah, that was amazing. That was such a thrill.
And you were writing She's a Killer at the time? When you...
I actually just sort of sent She's a Killer off, and I had all this energy, kind of writing energy. It was like I'd built up this real head of steam and finished the book and sent it off, and I suddenly had this idea for Walking Day.
Yeah.
And I have this real feeling with short fiction. It's a different feeling to novels. Short fiction, or for me, I find it has to come out quite quickly, and I feel like each story is a capsule, a little vessel of a particular type of energy. I've just finished a story that is actually about two elderly women, one who wants to die. She lost her family in a terrible accident 10 years earlier, and she's never recovered, and she's just decided, I'm going to end my life, but she wants to do one last piece of service, and she ends up working for an elderly woman who is obviously dying. So there's a really different sort of energy in that story. It's probably quite there's a lot of images. It's less concrete than a book like this. And very different again to Walking Day, which had a real kind of forward momentum. And is this boy actually going to die in this short space of time on the page or not? You know. So I do feel like when the idea comes, I need to really capture the energy very quickly, or it's almost as if it's going to just float away. Yeah. You know.
And I mean, short stories are really like, oh, by the way, both of these stories we're talking about are available to read online. So after this, you can go and see what we're talking about as well. I mean, short stories are often, the catalyst for a short story is often you hear a voice, right? And maybe we can talk about voice in your novels too, because I find that it's very strong, but also quite different as well. So
you mean each book is different?
Yeah, each book is different. So so this first one has a kind of a, well, as I said, wry, but sort of slightly hapless kind of man, but it's, and it's kind of ironic in its tone and everything. Yeah. And then the voice in Tess is obviously much more atmospheric and darker. Yeah. And then, then we've got She's a Killer, which is, I mean, do you want to talk a little bit about
her voice? Yeah, and She's a Killer really did start with the voice. So the first scene I wrote, which is not in the novel, was the narrator sitting down with her mother, she's a very problematic relationship with her mother. So in the novel, they only really communicate via Morse code. The narrator lives in the bottom flat, and her mother is in the house above. Her mother owns the whole house, and it's very run down. And she's a difficult person, the narrator, and so is her mother. She runs in family, and so they've sort of devised. And the narrator has a sort of near genius IQ, which is sort of a thing that hangs over her head, is that she's always been 1 point below genius, what they'd sort of class as genius level. They're silly categories, but and so she's decided that actually it's going to be much easier to communicate with her mother via Morse code. So that's how they talk. Anyway, so the first scene was actually her mother coming to visit her, and she was showing off this new handbag she'd purchased, and the narrator was sort of sitting there completely aghast going, the world's collapsing and all you can talk about is your new handbag. And immediately the narrator was sparky, she was difficult, the mother was difficult. You could see this tension between them, sort of like they're sort of attract, like they just can't help but do this, but they want to do it as well, even though they know it's going to be really awkward for both of them. And the narrator was very judgmental, and I was like, this, I could just feel it had an energy in it. Yeah, so that scene's not in the book, but it was enough for me then to go on and write what is the first scene and continue. And that what I said about the handbag and the narrator kind of going, you're just buying shit, what use is this, as one of my own concerns, and climate change obviously is all a part of this sort of overconsumption is what's brought us to this point. So I was like, oh, okay, here we go. This is a space for me to write about this thing I'm really worried about.
Yeah. So we'll come back to climate, but I just wondered, can you maybe just give a little bit of insight to readers about what kind of work goes into constructing a voice in terms of...
I'll try.
Technically, I suppose.
Yeah, technically.
What are you thinking about when you're trying to convey a voice?
So it has to feel. It has to feel right. There has to be some kind of sense of veracity, which is a weird thing to say because the character is completely fictional. But for me, she has to be funny. For this book, she had to be funny. She had to almost be quite peripatetic in the way that she thinks. So she's all over the show. She can't settle on anything. She's quite she's in her own head. She doesn't really have any friends. So really, the only person she's talking to is her imaginary friend, who's a character in the book, and the people that sort of push into her life in the book. It's a really tricky question, Rachel. I mean, I suppose technically when I'm writing the sentences, I have, at this stage in my writing life, a sense of what's working and what isn't working. And really, but actually, it's not based on anything really technical. It's based on, does this feel alive to me? And if I've got a sentence that feels a bit, then I'll get rid of it. Yeah. And I'm really not precious. Like, I love being edited. I've had the absolute fortune of being edited by a terrific New Zealand editor called Jane Parkin, who's worked on so many incredible books throughout her working life as an editor. And so I'm always happy to take Jane's suggestions, and she actually makes me funnier. She'll just reverse a few words in a sentence and it'll be instantly funnier. And I haven't seen that. So, so it really, it's a tough thing. It's funny, I can apply a critical eye to other people's work and tell them exactly why or why not. Yeah. And I have to do this because I teach creative writing in the first part of the year. So I have to do this for the students. I can't just say, oh, that doesn't work. I have to tell them why, But I find it tricky with my own writing, and it really is driven by my gut. Yeah. And I think that I used to think that was unscholarly, that I wasn't schooled enough, that I hadn't read enough, that I hadn't read enough craft books, that I hadn't read enough of the great writers. But now I think, actually, no, that's just my writer's instinct, and that's a really precious thing, and that's what I need to listen to.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great argument for a lot of writing is instinct.
Oh, it totally is.
Yeah.
I can see that now with the students, the ones that come in that have strong instincts for a particular thing.
Do you think it's because they've read a lot of books and so they've absorbed them?
I tell you what, they have not.
Oh, I hate them.
No, but the thing is, and they've often watched a lot of television or films, and I tell you what, I did not grow up in a literary family. I was just saying to Rachel earlier, my early childhood reading was The Famous Five, and and then Trixie Belden. I don't have a family.
Those are great studies in story and character, though.
Well, yeah. But so I've caught up as an adult, but I watched a lot of television, and so my sense of form and story arc is informed by television, films, and probably music videos as well, and song lyrics. Yeah, that song lyrics were my first poetry. I remember as a 12-year-old, slightly embarrassing because it's not like great, but going and writing down words to Dire Straits song Telegraph Road, because I thought it was like really moody, and I was like, this is really meaningful, and I'd like, with a tape, because they weren't written down in the thing, so I'd like be pausing and writing down.
I did that with The Cure.
Oh, there we go. Much cooler. So you've always been so much cooler than me, Rachel. But it was that stuff, and my husband, who is a musician, he said, you always know all the lyrics to songs. But that's what I hear. I've had to learn to hear the different music parts, which I have done through living with him for so long, because he'll just go, listen to that bass, But for me, it was always about the lyrics. Yeah. So I say to my students, look, I want you to catch up with reading. These are the great writers. And I actually put a Tolstoy story in their reader, because I say, well, Tolstoy, is part of the canon, and I would encourage you to go on and read Anna Karenina and War and Peace. But this is a short story, so it's manageable, and it's really good for dinner parties. And people would Tolstoy, but you go, yeah, I've read Tolstoy. So you're about to say, I've read Tolstoy. Yeah. So I think it's really important, but I don't ever want anyone in my class to feel that they are the way I felt, that I wasn't good enough. Because we all instinctively carry form and narrative within we are storytelling creatures, It's how we make sense. We're pattern-making creatures. That's what it is, yeah.
Storytelling's quite a buzzword at the moment as well. There's all the...
does government departments use it?
Yeah.
Let's tell our story.
And marketing departments, of big business, they don't want to market a product, they want to tell you a story.
They want the narrative of the toilet cleaner.
Yeah. How are we going to wrestle it away from them?
But the thing is, they're right. They've what they have actually understood is that, and look, the great advertiser. So I started off as a copywriter before I went to university. I was tracking towards a career in advertising. My father was a suit in advertising, and I was like, no one in my family had ever gone to university. And I was like, oh, okay, well that's maybe something. I like writing. I could be a copywriter. And I won an award for a campaign I did, and but I went to my the boss who was sort of my direct report at that time, a woman called Chrissy LaHood, who worked in advertising for many, many years. And I don't know, people of a certain age might remember the Anchor butter ads, the Anchor Girl, and they told a real narrative. They were, in terms of advertising, a hugely successful campaign. And so what she understood was a narrative. You're not selling the product, you're selling the story.
Yeah.
And so it's smart. They're smart. Yeah.
Actually, that reminds me of something that Dave said yesterday. Is Dave here? Dave Lowe?
He is.
Yes, there he is. I wrote it down, Dave. It was very profound.
He is.
You said that your book was designed to make people feel the urgency of reducing carbon emissions by appealing to their emotions and sort of taking them on your story journey. So climate change is obviously central to your story. So how do you take an issue like that and make a novel out of it? Yeah,
it's tricky. I think that if I thought I'm writing a novel about climate change, I would have been so scared I wouldn't have written it. But really I was writing a novel about this crazy character. Yeah, so that made it almost, it's like you trick yourself. And the thing is that really to make a book palatable, you can't go, Sue said something in the previous session about writers don't go and go, I'm going to write about the grand themes of, I don't know, capitalism and love and divorce or whatever. I think that, and I've never thought about themes as I'm writing. So yeah, it's almost like I tricked myself into it. But so what I did was I thought I'm going to start at the point, very simple point actually, that I've often thought about, when I'm lying in bed early in the morning worrying about things. And I think, so we're going to have shortages with food and different products. Would I rather give up alcohol, say pretend like suddenly we couldn't grow grapes anymore because we had problems with the soil or the heat or flooding or whatever? Would I rather give up alcohol or coffee? Well, coffee's imported into here. So I'd sort of for hours, coffee or alcohol. It's alcohol that I'd give up. Yeah. So I thought, okay, so what about if we've got a world where it's really, really hard to get hold of products? So one of the things that is actually seriously in danger of being able to be produced is rice, because a lot of the rice is grown in Southeast Asia. They're low-lying, kind of deltas, and places like Vietnam. I mean, I think they're predicting that by the end of the century, 50% of Ho Chi Minh City will be underwater. It's really scary, you know, and often these farmers are subsistence people anyway, so they're not going to have any choice. Yeah. And so you think about, okay, so what if rice has gone, wheat prices have gone crazy, which we've actually seen recently with the war in Ukraine. You know, and then water, of course, is a major thing. So one of the things I did in my book was water's been completely privatised, and you pay as you would pay, you know, your rates you would pay for your water allowance. So my narrator, who does earn money but is sort of useless at managing it, but not huge amounts of money, she has, I can't remember how many litres, she has like 1 litre or 2 litres, it's a pathetic amount per day. So she never showers, she has a bird bath. So just little things like that. So I think once I could start to construct the world and those kind of pressures, that starts to put pressure on character, it starts to put pressure on how the story is shaped. And then I can introduce the things, the bigger worries, which is how the hell are we going to solve this? And that's where the plot starts to get legs, because some people come into her life that have a very strong idea about how we can solve this.
Right.
And it's through violence. Yeah. And that's another thing I've often thought about. I mean, some of the great thinkers around activism in the 20th century were Black rights movement, you know, and so Martin Luther King, who was into peaceful protest, and actually moved slightly away from that before he died. And then, of course, he had Malcolm X, who was in, you know, that opposite kind of way of thinking. And I've always been really interested in that. Like, do we just sit down and refuse to move, or do we actually kill the people who are the problem? You know, make a I guess, a straw man out of certain people. Yeah, so these were things I was thinking about, and I don't know the answer, and the book is undecided about what is the right answer.
Can you just talk a little bit about some of the characters in the story? Because I think you were you alluded to yesterday that Alice is a certain character who represents a certain attitude. But I think you carry that through the rest of your characters. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Alice, she's someone who has the means in terms of her ability to think, and also potentially to act, because I often think people who get things done are often quite single-minded people who won't consider too much about how other people think. They're just going to do their thing. So in many regards, Alice could be seen as someone who would be a leader in terms of how you might change and look at different ways to develop society, but she's pretty much given up. She's, you know, I don't think the book refers to her as a slacker. She's just, what she's done is she's gone, it's all too hard, I'm going to put my head in the sand, which is something that I at certain points have done. It's like, this is so hard to get my head around, because no matter what I do, I could go completely vegan, refuse to ever drive in petrol cars, never fly anywhere, but that's not stopping the oligarchs in Russia from taking a plane every day to go wherever they want to go, or a lot of the coal that's still being burnt in China, to give electricity to people. So it becomes this like, how the hell are we supposed to live? How are we supposed to deal with this? And so Alice has just gone, nah, I'm not going to deal with it. Yeah. So she refuses to read any stories about climate change or, so I sort of thought, well, she in a way is the sort of the parts of my own self that I feel guilty about, but also the governments that have are not choosing harder policies and forcing change, and the businesses that refuse to change as well. So she sort of represents that. And then she's got she calls her best friend. This woman doesn't really like her much, but she a couple called Amy and Pete, and they're very successful. He's a successful architect, and Amy is someone that Alice grew up with, and they live a really nice kind of she life and have a beautiful house and 3 children that they homeschool, and Amy does preserving for their bunker supplies and, this sort of thing. So I was sort of like, because one of the other issues is we have the middle classes who want to, and we have a growing, developing countries have growing middle classes, right? And we don't want to deny countries like India. Suddenly they've got, a household has a chance to have a refrigerator. Well, it might have CFCs in it still. I don't know if they're still making them over there. But, or to own a car for the first time in their families. Who are we to say no? Because we've had that that's a problem. That's sort of that we get more money so we can suddenly make a much bigger footprint. So I wanted to write about that and then how you deal with it. And this couple, their way of dealing with it is to use their money to actually hide, to buy a bunker and to become kind of survivalists. And I hate the whole, I'll be quite open about that, it's a strong word, but to me that sort of survivalist kind of way of thinking is so individualistic. And I think the only way out of this is for us to work as a community. And
it's only available to incredibly rich people, that kind of way of thinking.
Although I have known people who are not uber wealthy, who have this one person who has a little place and stores stuff away.
Okay.
So, and that's, to me, it's a real fear-driven response. I get it. Like, I totally understand. I mean, you look at what we did with toilet paper and the,
oh my gosh.
like we all have that, like, I've got to squirrel it away.
Not only what we did with toilet paper, but the scenes of people fighting over the toilet paper as well. It's not just a matter of, oh, bummer, I missed out. It's like, that person's got more, I'm going to go and... And it's like a tiny little, kind of example of what could happen on a bigger scale. And then the last character I'll talk about who's important in the book is Erica, who's a teenager who is radical activist, And so her whole way of thinking about it is my way or the highway, really. And I don't actually agree with that either, but I see it as a valid way of thinking around a problem. It's a problem, we'll kill it. She's quite a terrifying character.
Dave Lowe. I'm actually a climate scientist, but more recently a award-winning book author.
So what's been your experience of the Book Fest, and what do you think people get out of this sort of event?
I think it's wonderfully run by a bunch of very dedicated and passionate people. I've learned heaps. I've absolutely loved it, and I'd certainly come back to another festival like this. You just learn the thoughts and feelings of so many of New Zealand's top authors. We've just heard from Lloyd Jones, for example, and you're going into a different world, a different space, learning things that you never really thought about before. It's incredible. Good on Blenheim Marlborough for putting on an event like this. Fantastic.
Do you want to maybe read a little bit that we were sort of talking about doing a bit that really illustrates the
voice,
the voice of
I'm just going to read a little bit from kind of early on in the novel, and Alice is at home with Simp, Simp is Alice's imaginary friend, who's actually just in the very first page of the novel has suddenly reappeared. She disappeared when Alice was 7 and they burnt their childhood home to the ground, and Simp never came back, and she's suddenly come back into Alice's life, and Alice is 37. Alice is trying to catch Simp up on how the world's changed. Later that evening, I showed Simp the internet. No one had it at home when we were little. I flicked between social media platforms and celebrity gossip sites. Simp watched as I scrolled and the world whizzed by. She yawned. I looked at her. So what? She said to the internet. I kept scrolling, avoiding sites with news of riots and wildfires, food shortages, new viruses. I wanted her to see how the internet made you feel like something might happen. We both experienced the pre-internet wasteland. Long Sunday afternoons, stuck inside, windows dripping with condensation while my mother boiled up bones for soup. Television channels you could count on one hand. Hope was part of the internet's success. In truth, the news was always bad, but sailing on the current of connectivity was the sense you were a few clicks away from the very thing you didn't know you were looking for. "There's nothing good here," said Simp, "and you know it." I looked up from my screen. "I just wanted to show you," I said. "Anyway, life isn't supposed to be good anymore. People are suffering the consequences of their overconsumption." "But you just scroll past it," she said. "Past the people who can't afford to move to this island paradise, past pictures of the crematorium that was the Amazon and the extinct penguins of Antarctica, past the oxygen-deprived oceans." Everyone knew about those, even me. The thing was, I couldn't bring myself to care. There was nothing I could do. I couldn't help my place of birth, which, as Simp said, was an island paradise where the climate apocalypse was less apocalyptic. None of it touched me, not in a real way. Other people might react like it was the end of the world, but what difference did that make? Yes, it was a mountain of shit and it was avalanching down on our heads, but what was I to do about it? "I'm not an activist, I'm an observer," I said. "You're too lazy to observe," said Simp. Upstairs, I heard the volume on my mother's TV go down. The Morse code light box flashed yellow, my mother wanting to send me a message. The transmitter boxes were my idea, but that happened in an organic fashion. A withdrawal of troops too tired for combat, a silent truce. I'd taught myself to code, and slowly my mother had learned too. It suited our relationship. She being a paranoid conspiracy theorist who believed the government monitored her every text, and me being averse to conversing with my mother. Morse code had many upsides. It is much easier to understand a question like, "What are you doing?" when the phrase is stripped of vocal tone and facial expression and takes 15 seconds or more to ask. Morse code had no subtext, no emojis, caps or italics. Periods of signal absence carried no weight. And it was good for her elderly brain to code daily. I noticed that she'd become more paranoid of late. She told me that the government was capturing the details of our lives through our online movements and using it to persuade us to vote for Norman Brayley, an anti-immigration politician who had been in and out of government for eons. She may have been right about their methods, but not about Norman Brayley. There was a rumour going around that he wasn't even alive anymore, that he'd been cloned, that the man calling himself Norman Brayley was a puppet belonging to a dying generation of boomers. My mother didn't like him. She was absolutely his demographic, old and racist. But years ago, she'd seen him drunk in a restaurant and she didn't approve of any kind of intemperance in politicians. She believed that they should act like role models with good ideas on how to lead the country forward. I didn't agree with her because I didn't see being drunk as a moral problem. Surely his anti-immigration policies were a bigger problem. Also, I didn't think leaders were leaders because they were especially moral people or imaginative enough to be visionary. No, political leaders were just people who liked to feel powerful. The successful ones could talk quickly when asked difficult questions by journalists. The ones who said they were there to make a difference were play acting. Of all the leaders in our government, I tried to explain to my mother, Norman Brayley was probably the one being truest to his true self. "What would you know about leadership?" my mother replied.
That reading just reminded me of something in the book, which is when people are talking about the wealthugees online, and it's like the worst of the Facebook comments. So I remember when Behrouz Boochani came here, because he was probably our most high-profile asylum seeker that we've had in recent times, and the comments on the stories about him were just horrendous. I mean, people had no understanding of where he'd come from, what he'd been through. So it feels like a very complex thing to be exploring in your book with the wealthugees, because on the one hand, we don't want them, but is it we don't want them because we want to kind of guard our territory, or do we not want them because it's immoral to be bringing in the wealthy people?
Only the wealthy, yeah. So the book has kind of set this up as a problem where handily, as I was writing, this pandemic happened, and I thought, this went on and on. We could be in quite a lot of debt. So I'd sort of just, there's a one-liner that says that they bring in the wealthy G's to help pay off the debt from the most recent pandemic. Because I just kept thinking, you could keep just having pandemics and, So, immigration is such a fraught issue. And who do you bring in? Who do you allow to be here?
Who deserves it?
Who deserves it?
Exactly.
Yeah, and so really you can only come, in the book, you can only come if you've got the money to come to buy your way in. So it creates a kind of two-tier society.
Well, I like the way you don't offer any opinion or solutions about that. You just present a social media page where people are arguing about it, which is
yeah, they're horrible places to go, really.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about Simp.
Yeah,
where does she come from?
Yeah.
Why is she there?
Yeah. Okay.
What does she mean to you?
Yeah. Simp means a lot to me because when I was a child, I had an imaginary friend called Simp.
Oh.
Yeah. Don't know where I got the name from. Actually, a friend of mine said to me a few years ago, because I was talking about Simp, and she said, did you ever read the John Birmingham book, Cannonball Simp, which I knew the title, but I never owned, so maybe we'd had it out of the library and the name had stuck with me. I had a real weird, maybe it's not weird. When I was young, I thought, so there were two, the most beautiful names in the world to me as a child were Heidi and Simp.
Simp, which, Simp means something different these days as well.
It does, yeah. But so when I was writing the book, there was a strange little layer that's I completely stripped out where Simp kept fighting to name herself, and she wanted to call herself Bella because she thought that was a beautiful name, and
it means beautiful.
And it means beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, that was but and the narrator sort of refuses to call her. Anyway, it was an unnecessary kind of. It was just me having fun with the imaginary friend. So I think I wanted her in there because the narrator is quite she's not a very empathetic person. She, I said earlier, she doesn't really have any friends. She's doesn't have many social graces. Like she really doesn't know how to kind of oil the wheels of conversation. Yes, and so I see Simp as sort of being the kind of missing part of her kind of psychology, or a part that's been squashed, or is just not, she doesn't have any access to. So Simp is quite straight talking and is almost like a little bit of missing empathy, or it's separated out from her. Yeah. And also, it was just hugely fun to have a character there who only one. So if you're in there's a scene where they're having a sort of dinner around Alice's kitchen table, and there's maybe 6 people in the room, but she's the only person who can hear and see Simp. So every now and then Simp will pipe up. So you can get really great comic things happening where Simp will say something or, reflect on something someone else has said, but only Alice can hear. Yeah. So
but she occasionally answers.
She answers, but he had to be really careful with that as well, because it was like, no one knows really that Simp is there. So it was huge fun, and that thing of kind of almost filling out this, because it's hard when you've got a character who's not a particularly nice person. There's still really interesting people to read, but you can risk alienating your audience, and I am really always thinking of the reader. Like I want a readership, and I want to entertain people. I want them to have a good time, while they're reading. And so maybe Simp is there to slightly soften Alice as well, and to give her another dimension that is would potentially be missing without her.
Yeah.
And also, Alice is just weird. I mean, what sort of 37-year-old has an imaginary friend?
She's really you, though, isn't she?
No.
Actually, there was a little bit that I highlighted here that I was going to ask you about, which is, sorry, I've got my emergency reading glasses, my tatty ones, because I left my other ones at home. No, I'm not saying this. I'm definitely not saying this is you. This is me poking fun at you. The hill I climbed to go to work every day stood before me. Already I was running late, so I took my sweet time. There'd been a moment on the bus when I'd made a decision to tip my lunch out. She tips it onto somebody's shoulder.
She tips her sauerkraut, which actually is like has turmeric in it, onto this guy's shoulder in the bus, just because she does weird shit.
And we think at first she's done it by accident. I knew I'd done it. Simp was right about some things. I could be a bully, and my avoidance tactics were second to none, and perhaps I'd wasted my natural talents, and for sure my flat was a dump, but I had no heart's desire, not anymore. I'd trained that out of me. Did you enjoy writing her? Like
Alice?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, huge fun. Yeah. Huge fun. And that's what I was saying when I wrote Walking Day quite soon after I'd sort of handed in the manuscript. I still had this energy. It's like has anyone ever been a sprinter? Anyone?
Only at primary school.
Yeah, so same. But I did a running kind of group a few years ago, and they were getting us to do a lot of sprints. And one of the things that the coach would say is, don't stop at the end line. Like I want you going 100% to the end line, and you can't just break. You've got to let yourself. And you sort of have to learn how to run fast again if you haven't done it for a while. Like it really is like, and it's hard because push, and so that's how I felt at the end of this. I still had this. I was still. I'd finished. I'd come to the end line, but I wanted to use the energy, you know.
And you sustained it for a lot. I mean, this is a 400-page book.
Rachel, I mean, yeah, because look, it's like, and, you know, funny, I was looking at it yesterday to do the session with Dave, and I thought, I don't know if I ever want to write anything that long again.
Mm-hmm. How long did it
never
take
say
you?
Never. I wrote 80,000 words in 4 months.
Stop it.
It was insane. No, I don't think I was very nice to live with. My poor husband and sons. I probably wrote like, I probably wrote like that much in 4 months.
Wow.
Is that wet? Yeah, from when they kind of get over to the Wairarapa. I took 5 months unpaid leave from my job, and I knew I had this finite time.
Yeah.
I had a deadline. I'm really good with deadlines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to open up for questions in a minute, but I just wanted to ask you about satire. And what do you think that? Because this is, I would see this as a satirical novel. Would you?
Oh, I don't know.
I know people have definitely called it that.
So I have trouble kind of defining satire. But I do love. You know, The Thick of It and The Death of Stalin. So Iannucci, he's like an amazing satirist. And actually one of my favourite comedians is, his name's just gone over my head. God, that's so embarrassing. Stuart Lee, who I would say is like a very high level of satire, but to the point where it's like making the audience... reeling the audience and making them implicit and then kind of taking a big dump on them. Okay. Like, I don't know. I mean,
your scene in More Wilson's is definitely
satire. I suppose so, yeah.
Lampooning.
I think that if I'm going to write satire, I'd be terrified again.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't... Yeah, it's...
I mean, what do you think that satire can do that a more straight novel can't?
Well, the thing that comedy does, I suppose, that laughing is and that's what Stuart Lee's doing as well. It makes you kind of go, oh yeah, I'm really laugh. Oh, I'm really relaxed. oh my God, did you just say that? You know, yeah. So there's that, and but it's I actually love that feeling of being really entertained and kind of having a real true laugh, but also
going oof.
Yeah, like
so what did I just laugh
when
at?
The Office came out, that was but that almost went too like we used to watch it with my late mother-in-law, who my husband would always say she doesn't have an ironic bone in her body, and she just took it straight. She couldn't handle it. She was like, "Why is this person like this?" Like, yeah, and yeah. So there's a tension there. So I think that it's almost like it's the sugar coating on a bit of pill, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so actually it's a very forceful way of communicating. Yeah. My favourite way to think about difficult problems is through comedy. Yeah. So some of my favourite TV has been, and not that Fleabag's really kind of looking at difficult, I suppose, kind of feminism and mother, father, sort of female relationships, that kind of thing. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I just love comedy.
Yeah. Do we have any audience questions? I have more questions if nobody does, but not at the moment. No, there's one. Oh, there's one behind you, Steve.
Sorry, is this on? Right. I was just, you were talking about consumption and wanting an audience, a readership, because I struggle to spend money on books. I read on my phone through Overdrive library books. But it's the same as listening to Spotify. I wonder what I'm contributing to you as an author if I read books like in that way. Is there a better platform that, as a reader, I can...
Well, we do. So, I mean, on a practical level, the library, so we have the, is it the copyright?
Public lending rights.
Thank you. Yeah, so for all published authors, when you borrow books out of the library at the end of the year, we get, just before Christmas, which is always nice, we get a certain percentage of kind of borrows. So that's really good. But, I mean, it's cool that you asked that. It's something, Spotify's terrible for artists, by the way, absolutely terrible. Going to live gigs is, I mean, I know that's really complex at the moment as well. And I like to buy, we've got a record player, I like to buy vinyl when I can to, but yeah, I get it. I get the tension there as well. And I'm the same. I buy all these books. And then the other day I was like, I've actually just need to clear some space. I put them out in the front of our house and get people. But I've been thinking about this as well because I am really, having worked for the publisher for 9 years, I've been really, really aware of how oversaturated the book market is. And to the point where sometimes I'd find it a little bit depressing. I'd be, where is the audience going to be for this? But at the same time, I want to hear the stories. Like I'm hungry for stories. And so I'm starting to think about different ways to tell stories. And so the short story is another thing. Like at the moment I'm writing short stories and I'm not thinking about a collection. I'm just thinking about I want to make these stories and get them out on the internet where I can. But also I'm starting to write a play, and I've been thinking about when I was young, the first writing I ever did actually was plays. So at school we'd make them up on the spot, and I always had to be the narrator. And recently I've been thinking we have in our street we have a matariki evening, and I was thinking actually next year will be really cool. I'd like to maybe get together with a group of some of the kids in the street and the adults and they have various talents, and actually just make a play maybe about so different ways to kind of create story. I'm really interested in thinking about that at the moment, because it's just, I don't want to put more stuff out for the sake of, I never want to be a writer who just keeps putting stuff out. I think that's...
Plays are more collaborative as well. I mean, I know we collaborate with editors and things, but really it's all your own work, isn't it? So are you attracted to that idea?
I'm really attracted to that idea. My husband played in bands for years and still does. He writes music for film and TV. He's always collaborating with, so now it's with producers and directors, and back in the day it was with his band members, and they're always listening to each other. And so it's always a conversation, and I've been hugely jealous of that, And I want that.
Yeah.
I absolutely want that. Yeah.
So in the future, your next thing might be the play by Kirsten McDougall. It might be the film, or
well, I have been thinking.
Yeah.
I've met a few film and TV producers recently, and I am actually thinking of trying to write a film script for Tess, because in my head, that's TV, that's film.
Right.
Yeah, like I have a very...
Well, you'd never get this in a 90-minute film for a start.
No, people are interested in it as a film, but I can't see it like that. Yeah. Whereas Tess, it's far more visual and...
Very visual.
Yeah.
Very atmospheric.
Yeah. So you can do a lot through just actually how people are moving and what's happening visually. Yeah.
Great. Another question?
Kirsten, I see that you have been doing a session with Dave Lowe, who's here today and is the author of The Alarmist. And, of course, both your books are about it's the biggest issue in the world, isn't it? Climate change.
Yeah.
In your talks with Dave in the session, and just informally, and in your own sort of mind, how do you feel about what's going on? Is it hopeless? What do you do? What do you think? Are we doomed? What do you and Dave think about that?
Dave's so much better on this than I. I think that I have real moments of pessimism. Yeah. And then, but that's kind of a cul-de-sac way of thinking, and we have such a finite time being alive, that I really try to counter that with more kind of optimistic ways of thinking and doing. So one of the things I've done is join my local stream team. So we do planting days, riparian planting, and we interact with the different kind of local, regional and local council in Wellington Water on the water quality. And I've met some incredible, there's this water activist in Wellington who just lives down the street from me called Eugene Dwell, who is this amazing guy who's just basically dedicated his retirement to water issues. So what I've found is that, like, I'm someone who's quite physical, so actually physically planting trees and grasses is a way for me to physically get rid of some of my, terror. And then also we make submissions on things. So, the emissions trading scheme. There's all sorts of different things that that we've made submissions on. But and then the thing that Dave says is that we have the technology to deal with a lot of issues. So that I often feel really hopeful. What we need is as citizens, as voting citizens, to create the political will. We need to, the government is led by what we want. So I think so one of the things we do with the stream team is we will routinely invite the local MP, the mayor, the different councillors down to show them what we're doing. And we go, we're not talking at you. We're not telling you you're doing it all wrong. We look at what we're doing. This is the vision we have for our stream. How can we work with you? And one of the things Eugene is very, very good at doing, he's like, he's an absolute pit bull on the pant leg of all of these councillors and different people in charge of things in the most lovely way, but he won't let go, So I've learned a lot through working alongside him and how we can deal. But yeah, I mean, I worry, but then you've got to offer. I've got kids, and I'm not just going to continually tell them it's all doom and gloom, because it's actually not. We can make good things still, but we need to be very, very careful about the choices we're making. And Dave says time and time again, I've heard him say, and he says in the book, we've got to the end of this decade. We have to make changes, And I see that, one of the things I think if I want to write about next is actually offering up visions of different ways we can live, where it might not be that we've all got cars or, all the things that we're used to kind of having for our own households and this sort of thing. But I still think we can have a really rich existence. Potentially we can have actually a better existence. I think that a lot of the kind of social ills we see in our children, the anxiety, high rates of depression and self-harming, are to do with the way that we cut ourselves off and we're on these things, we've got the little screens and we get ourselves into these little tunnels. But actually if you sit down with people and laugh and have music and dance, and that is a way to allow your brain to relax and get creative with solutions. So I suppose it's that sort of thing of trying to model some good behaviour. But I'm as scared as everyone else. But I've got to do something. That's an energy as well. So actually channel it into, make some submissions. Go to your local planting day. Get involved with whatever is happening with your water and infrastructure, to the level you can. I know everyone's got busy lives and this sort of thing, but it's important stuff, and you can't just leave it all up to the government. They need to be told what to do, and then their job is to put that into policy, that's kind of, I don't know.
Yeah, it's very much that act locally, think globally, act locally kind of thing.
And that was for my own mental health. It was like, if I keep thinking about some of the sites I've seen in China, like massive concrete dams and things, I can't do anything about that. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a really good note to end. It's exactly 1:00. Thank you, Kirsten. That's been really great. Yeah. And thanks everyone for listening. And please thank Kirsten for me.
Yeah. Thanks.
Now, Kirsten's books are for sale over there, I believe, are they? I hope, yes, and she'll be available to sign them.
Yep.
I really recommend all of these books. Actually, I have a special place in my heart for Tess. I'm not sure why, but I just loved it.
Film with me.
Oh, okay, good, you're on. But yeah, please go and check them out. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was Kirsten McDougall speaking with Rachael King at the 2022 Marlborough Book Festival. A big thanks to all the writers that have supported the festival, as well as the audiences that attended in person or listened online. If you'd like to learn more about the event, head over to marlboroughbookfest.co.nz. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Thanks for listening.